Sophie stood alone next to her father's now empty house for close to 15 minutes, knowing she'd never return to this place again. She wanted to allow herself time to experience the feelings of relief and sadness pulsing through her heart and gut. She visualized her father as she stood often to see him during her annual visits back home. Seated at the kitchen table, bathed in a low light, smoking cigarette after cigarette, she remembered the ever-present stacks of now-discarded magazines and newspaper clippings he piled neatly on the floor next to his feet. As she blinked back the tears filling her eyes, she turned one last time to overlook the creek in the meadow where he had, and tried futilely to remember the names of her father had given the deer, remembering how nearly every single time he called her he would talk endlessly about them and how she almost invariably would tune him out. Now she realized she paid closer attention and knew which one was which. Realizing this thought was too hopeless, she dropped to her hands on her face and sobbed. This was the moment of finality that she had both longed for and feared. The house sparkled, the furniture, clothing, cookware, books, memorabilia had all been packed and tossed away or carted off by the auctioneer. There was nothing left but memories. The smells her father had filled his home with were already fading, and soon too would be replaced with those of new owners. Nothing would ever be as it had been, and she simultaneously had to bring back her father, struggling to let him go. Dabbing the tears that had begun to flow endlessly, Sophie knew there was nothing to do now but go on.
That's it. Are you gonna quit that nasty habit?
Screw you ex-smoking holier than thou Miss Thang. I can't believe after all I'm doing for you, you won't let me smoke in the truck. I'm warning you, it's gonna take us 3 weeks just to get back to Oregon. Because we're gonna have to stop every 30 miles for a fix.
How are you?
Go.
There you go, snorting again. I think I'm kidding. You think I'm kidding. This provokes a lot of anxiety for me, Sophie. Driving and smoking go together like Bonnie and Clyde. Once is no good without one's no good without the other. Nice catch! What key is it? This one, right?
Yeah.
Shut up, Louise.
Referring to Beverly's plotting commitments, she saw them off at the airport just 4 days before. As they hugged, Beverly had just warned Jay, "Now don't go pulling away, Thelma and Louise, crap out of there. Don't stop at the bars, don't blow any oil trucks, and for God's sake, don't go near any cliffs." The comment had humored them for the last 3 days, as they cleaned out Sophia's father's house, and they frequently referred to one another as Thelma and Louise.
Don't you think about playing Lady Gaga? I've had enough coffee for that yet. Or no, come on. Maybe. Oh. Don't even think about playing Lady Gaga. I have not had enough coffee yet.
You can't even see what I'm playing or what I picked out.
Well, let's just say, maybe because I've known you for 13 years, 13 long, painful years, I just know that, okay, hold on. Maybe because your girlfriend warned me that you like to bless the road with Lady Gaga every time you go. Now pour me a cup of coffee, woman, and let's blow this popsicle stand. So help me, I'll kill you. You ready? Okay. Thelma, let's drive off this cliff. I guess we don't need.
We're in the second page, right?
We don't need poker face.
255. Maneuvering the long, overloaded truck out of the driveway and onto the street, Jay began to sing along, and Sophie couldn't suppress a smile. Just minutes before, she had been ready to break down, but now she was lighthearted and excited. Besides Beverly, who couldn't come along since she was just 2 weeks into her new school year in a new position, Sophie couldn't imagine no one she'd rather be with than Jay.
Hey, wait a minute. Didn't you... Did you call me Therma? Therma?
Yeah.
I thought I was Louise and you were Therma. We need to get this straight.
Tell you the truth, Louise, I don't really know which one's which. You can be whoever you want. You be Cher, I'll be Sunny. Hell, you can be Sunny, I'll be Cher.
Sophia grew amused, thinking that often delighted themselves arguing over some trivial pop culture tidbit and the great lengths each would go to prove the other wrong. They have dubbed these disagreements their culture vulture wars. She recalled how they have gotten into it at parties, who had written the song or had directed that movie, and invariably they cleared the room and found themselves alone. Well, Jay would say at such moments, we've once again run off with the competition with all supervised knowledge of all the popular and all the cultures. For the first few hours of the trip, they rarely spoke, but Jay could tell that Sophia was restless. He noticed her open the glove box to retrieve the insurance and rental agreement, which she had dropped on the floor. Cursing, she scooped them up and fished a rubber band from her pocket to bind the papers together before putting them back. Next, she placed the box of cassettes on her lap and began organizing each tape so the titles faced the same direction. Satisfied, she deliberately placed the box squares between them before reaching under the seat to fetch the road atlas. This she set neatly on top of the tape box. Seeming to have run out of chores, she momentarily leaned back in her seat, then quickly jerked forward to adjust the balance of the speakers. With the sound just right, she settled in again, but not for long. Once more she opened the glove box this time, removing a crisp new pocket notebook and a pen. Shifting in her seat to face Jay, she asked,
How many miles have we gone?
80 miles. 100, I don't know.
Did you zero out the odometer?
Oh, you skipped the part, whatever. What are you keeping track of? I would have paused.
Effort.
My smokes.
The miles, the gas, the hotel bills, how much we spend on food, that's what?
Why? Who cares how many miles we go on, how much gas we use, or what rooms cost? Don't go anal on me.
I'm not anal. I have to keep track of to be reimbursed. You know how my brothers are.
The 2 times he'd met Ron, he seemed like an easygoing guy. Tough to get to know, her older brother Mike lived in California and had never ventured to Oregon to see his sister, nor had she ever gone to see him. He didn't think Mike or Ron would be counting pennies under the circumstances. After all, she had saved them both a lot of grief by taking on the task of dealing with their father's house and belongings. Sophie yanked open the glove box and tossed the notebook inside. She remained silent as they drove west on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, passing one farm after another. Jay considered apologizing, but he wasn't sure why. He knew Sophie was trying to maintain her generally juvenile demeanor, but the events of the last 3 weeks were beginning to wear on her. Although she'd sworn she could handle the aftermath of her father's death alone, and claimed that she would relish driving solo in the rental truck across country, Jay had insisted on coming along. No way would he or Bev let Sophie face all the emotional and physical work he had to be done by herself. Since he was between jobs and he was the best company to accompany her, Jay knew that Sophie was too proud to admit she needed him, so instead they walked about the trip. He would say the main reason he was coming along so he could visit the East Coast with someone who had grown up there. In their 13 years of friendship, Sophie and Jay had been through a great deal. They first met when Jay was 26 and Sophie was 25. When Sophie missed a college class they were both enrolled in, Jay offered Sophie his notes. He invited her to his house to get them, and they instantly became friends. Sophie liked to say that they had been heterosexual. They would have been a classic case of love at first sight. As Jay got to know Sophie better, he revealed that his lover, Zach, had recently died of complications from AIDS. Ever since his death, Jay has remained single and celibate, telling anyone that asked that Zach had been his one and only, and that he could not be replaced. As the years passed, Sophie came to believe Jay's reluctance to become involved romantically with anyone knew was the means of protecting himself from ever being hurt so deeply again. A few years back, she had begun to encourage him to date, as she worked up the courage finally to tell him what she thought was the root of his long spell of solitude. Action.
Doing so had been a mistake. Jay storms out of Sophia's and Bev's house halfway through the birthday dinner they had prepared in his honor. He accused them of meddling in his life and told them both to fuck off. For 3 weeks, he refused to return their calls, and once, when Sophia stopped by his house to try to talk things out, he told her through the closed door to leave him alone. She stood outside the door, telling him how much he meant to her and how deeply she missed his friendship. Realizing he was not going to let her in, and she finally walked away, unsure that she had ever seen him again. Then a week later, he stopped by her work and he asked her to lunch. And she tried again to apologize. He cut her short. You did that already. Don't belabor the point. After that, Sophia had raised the issue with Jay again. As he drove, Jay remembered how 5 years ago in the friendship, Sophia had faced her real heartbreak when her lover left for another woman, when she told Jay that what she missed most was having someone to say goodnight to. He called every night for the next 6 months to tuck her in. He happily stopped doing so when one night Beverly answered the phone. He had known Bev for years and had long thoughts that she and Sophia would make a great couple. And now that the two of them have been going strong for 7 years, he knew he'd been right. Jay looked over at his friends. He noticed how tired Sophia looked and asked if they wanted to move the tapes to lie down on the seat to sleep. She shook her head and continued staring out the window. Sophia had known for years that her father's health was fragile. She still was shocked when he died. 3 days before his death, she had phoned to tell him that she and Bev were off for a week-long hike in the wilderness. When she asked how he was, a little under the weather, but it was no big deal. As they bid each other goodbye, he told her to have a great time and to send love to Bev. While Sophia and Bev were hiking in the Cascade Mountains, Sophia's father had slipped away due to the massive infection in his lungs. Sophia's big brother, Mike, was the first to hear of the father's death, and after 2 days of failing to reach his sister, Ron advised Mike to call Jay to find out where they were. Jay told Mike that Sophia and Bev weren't due home for 4 days, and they were 30 miles from a phone. He volunteered to hike in where he had thought they would be towed. Sophia what happened, but Mike refused Jay's offer, thinking it the best they enjoyed their trip. Their father had refused Jay's offer, thinking it's best they enjoyed their trip. Their father had been cremated, and there would be no funeral. Mike was assured that there had been cremated, and there would be no funeral. I already read that. Mike was assured that their father's attorney could handle the other details. Since none of the children wished to return to Pennsylvania and live in their home, their father had vowed after their parents' divorce that all remained to be done was for the house to be cleaned out and put for sale.
Talking with Mike, Jay understood why Sophie found him so difficult to connect with. While Mike was friendly, he was terse and officious, offering no hint that he felt much sadness at his father's death. Mike and Sophie said that their father had lacked ambition and was to blame for their parents' divorce. In his eyes, their father was not a real man. Despite knowing all of this, Jay thought it was odd that Mike would be so cool. Before their conversation, he always thought Sophie was too hard on her brother. After talking with Mike, he understood why she was. Sophie loved her brothers, but she was not close to either of them, as the way most of good friends. Mike's values, it seemed to her, were exactly opposite of her own. He was staunch and vocal, conservative, with conversations frequently laced with sexist and racist remarks. He had been married 3 times, each wife was younger than the last. On those rare occasions when they spoke, Mike used financial terms to answer the questions about how he was. Sophie, on the other hand, didn't much care about money. She didn't make much at her father's at her woman's shelter. But Beverly had a well-paying job as a school administrator. They had plenty. Still, Sophie thought Mike believed she was less than successful in life. That she was a lesbian. She also didn't sit well with him. It hurt that he never asked about Bev. Jay knew Sophie thought Mike was a bigot, and although she had tried to dismiss, she was hurt by Mike's disapproval of her. Ron, Sophie's younger brother, was nearly 10 years her junior. He respected and looked up to Sophie, but since he and his girlfriend lived hours away, the siblings got together only visit once or twice a year. Sophie felt closer to Ron, but he had been only 8 years old when she left home for good. In her mind, that was enough. Play.
God damn it.
Hoping to break the silence that engulfed them, Jay turned on the radio. He noticed that Sophie was tapping her foot to the beat of the song. He'd known her for over a decade. He felt more comfortable with her than anyone else, but realized it wasn't until he made this trip back to where he had been born he raised the girl that handled on her life. He asked Sophie about her favorite places here in the East and what she had done as a teenager, what it was like at 18 years of age to drive across country alone and go to college in Oregon. Sophie warmed to the questions, provided detail about never before she shared with Jay. She was animated as their first stop for food and gas, and she told him a funny story about traveling with her family when she was 10, and about how it was very Howard Johnson's. Her mother had absentmindedly driven off without Mike before he returned from the men's room. It wasn't until they were 3 miles down the road that Sophie realized Mike wasn't in the car. When she did, she cried and screamed loudly for her parents to go back and get them. After they ate and filled the truck with gas, Sophie took over driving, and Jay curled into the fetal position. You guys are supposed to switch places.
Oh. Well, you were supposed to pause.
Oh, pause. Sophie took over driving, and Jay curled into the fetal position and balled up a sweater as a pillow. Sophie drove for close to 4 hours, and when she realized that she was too sleepy to go any further, she pulled off the turnpike and drove to the nearest hotel. As she parked the truck, Jay woke and asked her what was going on. She told him that it was time to stop for the day. Jay rubbed his eyes and looked at the hotel sign.
Let me wake up and I'll go register with you.
Yes, Therma.
Have I been asleep long? Oh, wow. Okay, whatever.
And by the way, you're the fabulous company on the road. You insightful remarks, pointed questions, and generally interesting patter are really making the miles fly by, pal.
I'm sorry, I should have stayed away to talk to you. I just couldn't. These last few days have been rough on this old queen. Packing this truck and carrying all that heavy furniture is more labor than I'm used to. You would have done better bringing some big Dutch dyke, my darling. Now then, when we get to Oregon and start trying to figure out how to mix your dad's furniture with the funky, I don't know what that is, college, Bohemian college student decor of yours and Bev's, I'll be a real Martha Stewart at the moment, although I'm just a warm body.
This will help you wake up.
I thought this was a non-smoking truck.
It was. I can't ask you to go all day without smoking. You stay here and enjoy it.
I'm going to have a 6-pack and some burgers for... I'm going to go get some 6-pack and... I might get a 6-pack and some burgers for us. Please take advantage of my absence and call me Stevie.
I have to tell you something, Jay. I've been a jerk today. I just Jay, how can I repay you? You're so good to me. You've just been such a huge help these few days. I could never have got all that done without you.
Sophie, you know I despise this kind of verbal sentimentality. Stop it before I vomit.
No. Most of the time I honor your inability to link words to feelings. So just shut up and hear me out. I love you, friend.
That it? You are so incompetent as a woman sometimes, Sophie. So that was the big heart-to-heart. I can't believe you. You're pathetic. Tell me again, which am I? Therma or Luis? Okay, well, whichever one slept with, whichever one slept with Brad Pitt is the one I'm going to be. Got it? I love you too, Sophie. And when you call Bev, tell her I only thought about killing you twice today.
You have to love me. I'm your best friend, Thelma.
Done.